Prince of Wales for the royal procession. And there we have our first sight of Black Rod. Lady Usher of the Black Rod, the first time ever in the 650-year history of the post, Sarah Clarke. And she's responsible for security and management in the House of Lords, formally taking on the duties in 2018. So it's her first Queen's speech as well, lots of firsts today. And interestingly for Sarah Clarke, she was previously director of the championships at the All England Lawn Tennis Club, where she was responsible for the organisation of the championship. So no stranger to organising complex events, but this will be a rather different experience. And at the entrance to the robing room, we have the state trumpeters who will be ready to announce the start of the procession itself. There they are in their medieval uniform, unchanged for hundreds of years, ready for the signal from the Earl Marshal and the Marquess of Cholmondeley. And this scene that we're about to enjoy is something that takes us back many centuries. It's known as a procession in state. It's a statement of the sovereign's authority. Processions through the City of London in days gone by, including the heralds and the gentlemen at arms and all of the other people who take part in these processions, and of course the symbols of the sovereign's authority. In this case, the imperial state crown and the cap of maintenance and the sword of state. But the kind of procession in state that we're looking at here is unchanged in centuries. Lord Houghton there, the former Chief of Defence Staff, who is taking the sword of state in the procession today. And opposite him, we have Baroness Evans of Bowes Park, who is the leader of the House of Lords. And they are the senior peers who are performing the duty of carrying the regalia today. And as we can see, the state trumpeter sharply focused on the Marquess of Cholmondeley and on the Duke of Norfolk, who will be giving the signal to start the procession itself. The Royal Gallery, with its statues of previous monarchs in the far corner, and then the great paintings on the wall of Wellington's great victories by the artist Daniel Maclise. They dominate the Royal Gallery. It is one of the royal sections of the Palace of Westminster, so it's neutral ground, if you like. It's not part of the partisan areas, including the House of Commons and the precincts of the Commons. It's used by peers to greet guests and even to socialise on some days. And it's always a highlight of any visit to the Palace of Westminster to have a trip through the Royal Gallery, which of course in normal times doesn't have this seating there at all. It's a great open expanse. And it's one of the most impressive and splendid spaces in the palace itself, and that is saying something, because the robing room itself, with its Arthurian portraits, is a beautiful room. A couple of years ago, I was in there listening to former President Carter give an address on the kind of contribution that the UN can make and what he thought of that, and the contribution indeed that he could make in health terms across the world. So President Carter, just one of the former heads of state who's been in Parliament to give addresses either in the robing room or in the Royal Gallery itself. There have been some exceptions to that, of course. Some heads of state have been allowed to address both Houses of Parliament in Westminster Hall. That's seen to be an even greater honour because of the historical resonance of Westminster Hall itself. So we're within seconds, I think, of the Queen's emergence from the robing room and the fanfare by the state trumpeters to tell us that this state opening of Parliament of 2019 is to get underway. The Guards of Honour, provided by the Yeomen of the Guard in the Royal Gallery, still in place after they marched in well over half an hour ago. The heralds, who are facing the robing room as we look, ready to turn and lead into the Prince's chamber, into the House of Lords. And we'll see the gentlemen at arms as well featuring in that procession a little later on. We'll have the heads of the armed forces, the Air Force and the Navy, and the Army, and they will be taking part as well. And we'll see some of the senior political leaders who will be gathered in the House of Lords when the Queen's speech gets underway. And as I say, one of the most, I suppose, dramatic and familiar sections of the day is when the Queen arrives in the House of Lords and gives the signal to summon members of the House of Commons. And that is when Black Rod, the new Black Rod, Sarah Clarke, will get her attempt to go down and savour the atmosphere, if you like, in the House of Commons and see what kind of welcome she gets when she arrives there in a few minutes' time to summon the Speaker and the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and they will all walk together through the central lobby and up to the bar of the House of Lords, that's to say the entrance point of the House of Lords, to witness the speech itself. Marquis of Cholmondeley, whose job it is today to carry the crown, normally worn by the Queen, but not today, and to carry the crown at the head of the procession. And there we have the Queen's official consort today, the Prince of Wales, who will be 71 next month, having served almost a lifetime as heir to the throne and as Prince of Wales. The Queen was attended so many of these state openings, apart from a few over the years, but the vast majority of them. And will know exactly where every single member of the pageantry and the ceremonial is meant to be, and has a very sharp eye for the detail of the entire thing. I'm told that she misses nothing along the way, so there'll be lots of nerves there among the yeomen and all the others about exactly where they're standing and exactly how they're holding themselves. The train bearers who've been specially chosen, and then of course we have the principal members of the procession, including the captain of the Gentlemen at Arms and the captain of the Yeomen of the Guard, who also feature in the procession today. And passing the Gentlemen at Arms who are lining the Prince's chamber, providing a guard of honour in the Prince's chamber, a short walk through past the statue of Queen Victoria just on the left there, past the portrait of Henry VIII and the other Tudor monarchs, and into this magnificent chamber of the House of Lords, the masterpiece of Barry and Pugin. Queen will approach and take her place on the throne of the House of Lords with the Prince of Wales next to her. The crown will be placed on the table. The Duchess of Cornwall will take her place on the state chair that's been put there on the right-hand side. And the first thing that we'll hear from the Queen is an invitation to the members of the House of Lords and guests to be seated.
My lords, pray be seated.
Crown being placed, and the Queen will signal her approval for Blackrod. Marquis of Cholmondeley gives his signal with his stave of office, and the signal has been received by the Lady Usher of the Blackrod, Sarah Clark, in her first state opening, so a very big moment for her, taking part in one of the most famous pieces of parliamentary ceremonial that we have. Making her way down from the central lobby. Blackrod is announced, and approaching the members' lobby of the House of Commons, where the members congregate, and approaching the door of the Commons, which will be slammed in her face as a sign of the authority of the House of Commons. Three very firm knocks.
Blackrod!
And she enters. Will there be any heckling? There might be.
Mr. Speaker, the Queen commands this Honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
No.
I don't know.
Some words of dissent there, and no prizes for guessing who they came from. The veteran Labour MP for Bolsover, Dennis Skinner, who specialises in a bit of heckling on these events. And there we have the first time Boris Johnson as Prime Minister walking with Jeremy Corbyn, the Leader of the Opposition, on this Queen's Speech Day. Ian Blackford of the SNP, Liz Savile-Roberts of Plaid Cymru, members of the Cabinet and the Labour front bench, including John McDonnell, all of them walking in, not quite in a rush, but certainly there's always a bit of jostling, I have to say, when it gets to the middle and back of the queue, because they know that unless they jostle, they won't get anywhere near the House of Lords. Nick Brown, the Chief Whip for Labour, Andrea Leadsom for the Conservatives, Sajid Javid there, the Chancellor, who says he'll be delivering a budget next month. And Laura, a bit of chatting going on.
Between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, it doesn't look like they're agreeing on very much. Boris Johnson trying to have a bit of a chinwag there, and Jeremy Corbyn, eyes firmly fixed forward. It's just occurring to me, watching them come through, they have even less in common than Jeremy Corbyn had with Theresa May.
So there you have the crush, look at it. 650 MPs trying to get out of the House of Commons all at the same time. By tradition, some will stay behind in the Commons, they won't go. Michael Ellis there for the Conservatives. And James Cleverly there with Joe Johnson, also Conservatives. Mike Gapes with Nicky Morgan. And here we are. So here we have the new Lord Chancellor, Robert Buckland, who has the speech in his ceremonial purse. We'll present it to the Queen. Steps back one and then turns around.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation. My ministers will work to implement new regimes for fisheries, agriculture and trade, seizing the opportunities that arise from leaving the European Union. An immigration bill ending free movement will lay the foundation for a fair, modern and global immigration system. My government remains committed to ensuring that resident European citizens who have built their lives in and contributed so much to the United Kingdom have the right to remain. The bill will include measures that reinforce this commitment. Steps will be taken to provide certainty, stability, and new opportunities for the financial services and legal sectors. My government's new economic plan will be underpinned by a responsible fiscal strategy, investing in economic growth while maintaining the sustainability of the public finances. Measures will be brought forward to support and strengthen the National Health Service, its workforce and resources, enabling it to deliver the highest quality care. New laws will be taken forward to help implement the National Health Service's long-term plan in England and to establish an independent body to investigate serious healthcare incidents. My government will bring forward proposals to reform adult social care in England to ensure dignity in old age. My ministers will continue work to reform the Mental Health Act to improve respect for and care of those receiving treatment. My government is committed to addressing violent crime and to strengthening public confidence in the criminal justice system. New sentencing laws will see that the most serious offenders spend longer in custody to reflect better the severity of their crimes. Measures will be introduced to improve the justice system's response to foreign national offenders. My government will work to improve safety and security in prisons and to strengthen the rehabilitation of offenders. Proposals will be brought forward to ensure that victims receive the support they need and the justice they deserve. Laws will be introduced to ensure that the parole system recognizes the pain to victims and their families caused by offenders refusing to disclose information relating to their crimes. A new duty will be placed on public sector bodies, ensuring they work together to address serious violence. Police officers will be provided with the protections they need to keep the population safe. They will also be awarded the power to arrest individuals who are wanted by trusted international partners. My government will bring forward measures to protect individuals, families, and their homes. Legislation will transform the approach of the justice system and other agencies to victims of domestic abuse and minimize the impact of divorce, particularly on children. My ministers will continue to develop proposals to improve internet safety and will bring forward laws to implement new building safety standards. My ministers will ensure that all young people have access to an excellent education, unlocking their full potential and preparing them for the world of work. My government will take steps to make work fairer introducing measures that will support those working hard. To help people plan for the future, measures will be brought forward to provide simpler oversight of pension savings. To protect people's savings for later life, new laws will provide greater powers to tackle irresponsible management of private pension schemes. To ensure that the benefits of a prospering economy reach every corner of the United Kingdom, my ministers will bring forward a national infrastructure strategy. This will set out a long-term vision to improve the nation's digital, transport, and energy infrastructure. New legislation will help accelerate the delivery of fast, reliable, and secure broadband networks to millions of homes. An aviation bill will provide for the effective and efficient management of the United Kingdom's airspace. Proposals on railway reform will be brought forward. A white paper will be published to set out my government's ambitions for unleashing regional potential in England and to enable decisions that affect local people to be made at a local level. My government is committed to establishing the United Kingdom as a world leader in scientific capability and space technology. Increased investment in science will be complemented by the development of a new funding agency, a more open visa system, and an ambitious national space strategy. My ministers remain committed to protecting and improving the environment for future generations. For the first time, environmental principles will be enshrined in law. Measures will be introduced to improve air and water quality, tackle plastic pollution, and restore habitats so plants and wildlife can thrive. Legislation will also create new legally binding environmental improvement targets. A new world-leading independent regulator will be established in statute to scrutinize environmental policy and law, investigate complaints, and take enforcement action. Proposals will also be brought forward to promote and protect the welfare of animals, including banning imports from trophy hunting. The integrity and prosperity of the Union that binds the four nations of the United Kingdom is of the utmost importance to my government. My ministers will bring forward measures to support citizens across all the nations of the United Kingdom. My government remains committed to working with all parties in Northern Ireland to support the return of devolved government and to address the legacy of the past. My government will take steps to protect the integrity of democracy and the electoral system in the United Kingdom. My government will continue to invest in our gallant armed forces. My ministers will honour the Armed Forces Covenant and the NATO commitment to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. As the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, my government will ensure that it continues to play a leading role in global affairs, defending its interests and promoting its values. My government will be at the forefront of efforts to solve the most complex international security issues. It will champion global free trade and work alongside international partners to solve the most pressing global challenges. It will prioritize tackling climate change and ensuring that all girls have access to 12 years of quality education. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other measures will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
The Lord Chancellor approaches Her Majesty and takes delivery of the speech, puts it back in the official purse, and makes his way back down the steps. The Queen having delivered the Queen's speech to open this new session of Parliament in 2019. The Prince of Wales looking on next to Her Majesty, and the pages of honour are now ready for the procession back to the robing room, where the Queen will prepare to leave the Palace of Westminster and return to Buckingham Palace. Members of the judiciary, very prominent in the House of Lords today, and the bishops too. We saw glimpses of them earlier, including the former Bishop of London, Dr. Richard Charters, and others also taking their places. And many former government ministers from the House of Commons, of course, who have become life peers with a wealth of experience in terms of parliamentary and political affairs, who've seen many of these ceremonies in the past, and we spoke to two of them earlier, Lord Fowler, who's here today, and Dame Margaret Beckett, who is still in the House of Commons. So as the crown is being carried out, my guests are still with me here. Let's stay on the pictures, but I'll bring in my colleague Laura Kuenssberg, our political editor, just for a thought there on the content of the speech that the Queen has just delivered.
A very long shopping list of all the things that Boris Johnson would like to do. Some of them very much bread and butter issues, whether that's more funding for schools or trying to spend more money on the NHS, or coming up with, at long last, a new way of organising care for the elderly, which is something that successive governments have struggled to grapple with. But the unsaid reality, of course, as well as that shopping list, is that the biggest question hanging over is what Her Majesty said with great certainty at the beginning of the speech: we will be leaving the European Union at the end of this month. There's no way that anyone in this square mile can be sure that that will happen. And whether it happens and how it happens is a much bigger influence than anything that we've just heard being said.
That was literally the first sentence of the speech.
Indeed, because it's the government's first priority. But there is nothing at this stage that the government is setting out in legislation that will either make that less or more likely. That will all come down, first of all, to the outcome of talks this week in Brussels, and then what Parliament does with either a deal or lack of one in the next few days. And with, as these moments of history unfold in front of us, something much more unusual, at this weekend we expect Parliament to be gathering to try to make head or tail of what actually happens next. That'll
be on Saturday, of course, and as you were mentioning earlier, Laura, that'll be the first Saturday sitting in nearly 40 years. The MPs are now making their way back to the House of Commons as the Queen makes her way into the robing room. And having listened to that speech, lots of them, including many backbenchers, making their way back. Diana, but there, of course, a frontbencher. Rose Hudson-Wilkins there, the Speaker's chaplain, next to the Prime Minister. And the rush back to the Commons chamber, because, of course, the debate on the Queen's speech will start in a short while. Sir Alan Duncan, the former Foreign Office Minister, we saw the former Attorney General Dominic Grieve, and here we have Mr. Speaker Bercow. And just a word then, Laura, at this point about his role in all of this, because of course he's announced that he's going, but his role in this Brexit process has turned out to be very, very significant.
It's been very significant, and it's been very controversial. I mean, look, let's be clear about what's happened in the last few years. Both sides of the argument, both former Remainers and Leavers, have pushed the rules, let's put it that way. And many people who support Brexit have seen or suggested and felt very strongly that John Bercow has allowed the opposition parties and some Conservatives who want to try to stay in the European Union to push the rules of Parliament too far. Now, of course, many people would dispute that. I'm sure he would dispute that very strongly himself if he ever gave interviews, which he does very, very rarely. But there's no question that on all sides we've seen all sorts of conventions and precedents being broken, all sorts of fascinating, very unusual interplay between the courts and Parliament, not just under Boris Johnson, but of course when Theresa May was still in Parliament. If we go back, if we rewind a while, when she was Prime Minister, we can see her just talking to the now Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. At that point, her government didn't even want to give Parliament a meaningful vote on how we were going to leave the European Union. That, of course, ended up in the Supreme Court, what now feels about a century ago.
Yeah.
It was only in January 2017, and now we are set again, not just for political clashes of epic proportion over the next few days, but it's quite likely that once again this will all end up in the courts.
Yeah. Give a penny for Theresa May's thoughts today.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, I can quite imagine. I mean, for her and her team, one of whom, her former team, is sitting with us in this residence room today. You know, they sweated blood and tears to come up with a deal with the European Union. It failed catastrophically to pass. It is possible that something not too dissimilar to her deal may well end up being put before MPs very soon. The difference, of course, people believe, which frankly is the reason why Conservatives, who don't necessarily like him very much, but allowed Boris Johnson to take place in number 10, is that he, as the chief cheerleader for Brexit, would be the one who'd be able to sell that to this place. But, you know...
Yeah, the very point, Andrew, I wanted to put to you, because given your experience of working with Theresa May, it's not the penny for the thoughts, but it's just the idea that the deal that might emerge may well not be that different to the deal that Mrs May worked so hard to put together and was comprehensively and repeatedly rejected. So, you know, for those of you who worked alongside, that must be rather galling, surely.
I wouldn't say galling. I think it was a very good deal. The deal that Theresa worked very hard with others to put before this House, as Laura